What if tomorrow already sees the consequences? There is a word we use when things fall apart. Suddenly. Suddenly the relationship ended. Suddenly the body gave out. Suddenly the career collapsed. Suddenly a person we thought we knew became a stranger. We say suddenly as if we are testifying to something, as if we witnessed an interruption in the natural order of things, an event that arrived without warning, without cause, without history. But nothing is sudden. Nothing. What we call sudden is only the moment we finally looked, the moment the thing we had been not looking at long enough became too large to ignore. The collapse was already happening, the fracture was already spreading, the distance was already growing, quietly in the silences between conversations and the things left unsaid, in the small retreats we made from each other that we called nothing, that we called just tired, that we called not the right time. Tomorrow already sees this. Tomorrow looks back at today and sees not a single moment, but the direction, a lean, a slow accumulation of weight on one side of something that was always going to tip. Tomorrow does not predict, it reads. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Suddenness. Think of an old building. Before it falls, there are years, there are winters and weights and small movements in the foundation that no one measures. There are cracks that form and fill with rain and freeze and expand and no one notices because no single crack looks like collapse. Each one looks like just a crack. Each one looks like nothing. And then suddenly the building falls. Except it didn't. It fell over decades. It fell in increments, too small to mourn. It fell in every winter that no one reinforced the foundation, in every inspection that didn't happen, in every year that the structure carried more than it was built for. The moment of collapse was only the last sentence of a very long story, and the story had been telling itself the entire time. This is not a metaphor about buildings. This is about you. The things that have collapsed in your life or that are slowly collapsing right now did not begin when they fell. They began much earlier in a pattern, in the repetition, in something you chose or avoided or allowed in so many small consecutive moments that it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like just the way things are. Viktor Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, a pause, a gap in which a human being can exercise choice. What I want to ask you is what has been happening in that space? Not occasionally, consistently. What have you been choosing in that gap over and over again? For months, for years, perhaps for as long as you can remember. Because tomorrow is watching that space. Tomorrow is watching what you do when no one else is watching. When you are tired, when you are afraid, when you are alone with yourself. Tomorrow reads the pattern in those private moments like a book, and it already knows how the chapters end. The question is not what happened to you. The question is what you have been doing quietly since. Chapter 2. Repetition as construction. Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do, not what we intend, not what we believe about ourselves, not what we declare in moments of resolution or regret. What we repeatedly do. There is something almost uncomfortable about the sentence if you sit with it long enough, because it means that identity is not a thing you have. It is a thing you make continuously through action, through repetition, through the 10,000 small iterations of behavior that accumulate into something recognizable as a person. Aristotle called this ethos, character, but what he meant was not character. In the polis's sense, the character you present at dinners or on resumes, he meant the deep grain of a person, the habitual lean, the default direction the soul takes when not instructed otherwise. And the terrifying thing about ethos, the thing that makes it more than a philosophical nicety, it has is that it builds without announcement. No one declares the day they became the kind of person who avoids difficult conversations. No one chooses the morning they became someone who numbs themselves rather than feels. It happens in the repetition, in the pattern, in the accumulation of choices that avoids eventually individually seemed like nothing and collectively became a way of being. Think of a river. A river does not carve a canyon in one afternoon. It moves across the same stone for centuries. The stone does not change dramatically on any particular Tuesday, but the river does not negotiate with the stone. It simply keeps moving, and eventually there's a canyon where there was none. Your habits are the river. Your character, your future self is what the stone becomes. And tomorrow already sees the direction the river is moving. It sees whether you are carving toward depth or running shallow across the surface and evaporating before you reach anywhere worth reaching. This is not condemnation. It is geometry. It is the simple, patient arithmetic of repetition. What you do today, you are teaching yourself to do. Every repetition is a lesson. Every pattern is a curriculum. Chapter 3, Time is amplifier. Time is not neutral. This is perhaps the thing we least understand about it. We treat time as a container, as if it simply holds things, as if passing through time were like passing through a room. You enter the same as you left, only elsewhere. But time does not merely hold things, it multiplies them. Whatever you feed into time, time returns to you larger. Fear, fed over years, becomes a worldview. It becomes the filter through which everything passes and from which everything emerges smaller, more threatening, more impossible than it actually is. Avoidance, repeated long enough, becomes identity. You do not merely avoid things anymore. You become someone for whom certain things are simply not possible. Not because they aren't, but because the repeated act of not doing them has carved a channel so deep that you no longer remember what it felt like to move differently. The same is true in every direction. Courage, practice in small moments, growth into something structural, steadiness, chosen repeatedly under pressure, becomes a kind of gravity in a person, something that others feel without being able to name it. Love, tended with attention, deepens in ways that brief love cannot. Honesty, even when it costs something, over time builds a kind of interior architecture that you can actually live inside. Time amplifies, and this means that the question is never merely what am I doing right now? The question is what am I feeding into time? Because what you feed into today, tomorrow will return to you at full volume. Martin Heidegger wrote about the call of consciousness. Martin Heidegger wrote about the call of conscience. He described it as not as a voice from outside, but as something that arises from within, from the deepest structure of what it means to be a self that exists in time. The conscious, for Heidegger, calls you back to yourself. It calls you back to what you are actually doing with the only life you have. I think what Heidegger was describing in the dense and difficult way that Heidegger describes everything was the quiet horror of watching time pass move while moving in a direction you have not consciously chosen. That horror, that small barely audible call, that is tomorrow, whispering from the future, telling you what it can already see from there. Every day you do not choose your direction, something else is choosing it for you, and it has been chosen for quite some time. Chapter 4, Pain Becoming Architecture. There are wounds that do not heal because we do not let them. Not because we are weak, not because we are broken in some fundamental way, but because we found them useful. Useful in the way that walls are useful. Useful in the way that numbness is useful. Useful in the way that an explanation for everything is useful, even when the explanation is wrong. An unexamined wound does not stay still. It does not wait patiently in the corner of your psyche, of your psyche, for you to get around to it. It works. It works continuously, quietly, shaping the way you interpret events, the way you respond to closeness, the way you relate to your own vulnerability. It becomes a lens. And once a wound becomes a lens, you stop noticing that you're looking through it. You simply believe you are seeing clearly. Pain, carried long enough, becomes architecture. It builds structures inside you, load-bearing walls, rooms you do not enter, doors you have locked so thoroughly that you have forgotten what is behind them, and why you locked them in the first place. And you live in this house, you live in it as if it was simply the house, as if everyone's interior house has these same locked rooms, these same narrow corridors, these same windows that only face a particular direction. Paul Ricoeur spoke of life as narrative. He meant something precise by this, that the self is not a fixed thing, but an ongoing story, and that the storyteller, the person living the story, both shapes and is shaped by the narrative that has come before. We do not simply exist in time. We interpret our existence. We create meaning from what has happened, and the meanings we create from our wounds become the stories we tell about who we are and what is possible for us. This is where consequence becomes invisible. Because if the wound has become a worldview, then the consequence of the wound is not an event, it is a climate. It is the atmospheric condition of your entire interior life. You do not see it as a consequence, you see it as a reality. You do not recognize it as something that happens to you and then shaped you. You recognize it as simply the way things are. And tomorrow can see this. Tomorrow sees you navigating around rooms you don't remember locking. Tomorrow sees the decisions you make that trace back, not to what is in front of you, but to what had happened a long time ago that you have not yet gone back to. Tomorrow is not cruel in this seeing. It is simply accurate. The consequences of old pain are not behind you. They are in the floor plan of the house you are still living in. Chapter 5. The momentum of patterns. There is something that happens to patterns over time. They acquire momentum. A pattern that has been running for years or for a year moves differently than a habit formed last month. A way of being that has existed for a decade has gathered a kind of inertia, a tendency to continue simply because continuing is what it has always done. It no longer needs to be chosen. It simply happens, and the person inside the pattern often cannot feel it anymore, because you cannot feel the momentum of something you are moving with. This is why change is not just about decision. Decision is the beginning of change, not change itself. You can decide sincerely to move differently. You can feel the full weight of that decision, the genuine desire behind it, the clarity of intention, and still find that the pattern reasserts itself, not because you are weak, because momentum is real. Because the river that has been moving in one direction for 20 years does not redirect simply because you place one stone in its path. The Black Parfit thought deeply about the relationship between itself and its future versions. He asked whether the person you will be in 10 years is truly the same person you are now. This answer was complex and deliberately unsettling. There is continuity, but it is not identity in the way we usually imagine it. There is a chain of connected selves, not a single fixed thing persisting unchanged through time. What this means is, in the plainest possible term, is that you of 10 years from now is not inevitable. It is not predetermined by who you are today in some essential way, but it is heavily influenced by it. The patterns you are running today are being handed to the self that will exist in the future, and that future self will receive them, will inherit them, will find them already in place when they wake up. The question is what you are begetting. The question is what you are begetting. And awareness. Awareness alone is what can interrupt momentum, not willpower, not resolution, not deciding harder. Awareness, the capacity to see the pattern from slightly outside it, to name it, to watch it operating without being entirely inside it. This is what creates the space Frankl describes, the gap between stimulus and response, the thin but crucial pause in which something other than the pattern becomes possible. Tomorrow can already see whether the pattern is running or interrupted. It can see whether you are inside the momentum or the beginning, carefully to stand beside it. Patterns do not stop when you stop wanting them. They stop when you begin to see them, really see them, in full daylight. Chapter 6, The Road. Question. There is a question I want to leave with you. Not as a prompt, not as a challenge, as a genuine question. The kind that does not ask for an answer so much as it asks for honesty. If you continue exactly as you are, not as you intend to be, not as you hope to become, not as you describe yourself in your better moments, but exactly as you have been, in the patterns you actually run, in the habits you actually have, and the choices you actually make when no one is watching, when you are alone with yourself at the end of the day. Where does this road end? Not metaphorically, not philosophically, concretely, specifically, 5 years from now, 10. What does the body look like that has been treated this way for another decade? What does the relationship look like that has been given this quality of attention or quality of absence for another 5 years? What does the mind look like that has been fed these thoughts, these fears, these stories about itself for another 10,000 days? This is not the question designed to frighten you. Fear is not the point. The point is that tomorrow is already running this calculation. Tomorrow already knows the answer. And the question is simply whether you are willing to know it too. Whether you are willing to look at the direction before the destination arrives. Because this is what tomorrow sees, that today pretends it cannot. Today has the advantage of being present, the advantage of immediacy, the weight of everything that demands attention right now. The tasks, the fatigue, the noise, the ordinary pressing urgency of just existing. Today has good reasons not to look at the long road. But tomorrow has the advantage of distance, and from distance a direction is visible that is invisible up close. From a distance, a pattern is obvious that is invisible from inside it. From a distance, the road is a road, not just the next step. And tomorrow has been watching you walk it for longer than you know. Chapter 7, what tomorrow already knows. I want to be careful about something. I'm not telling you that the future is fixed. I'm not suggesting that because the pattern has been running, it will always run. I am not offering you a determinism dressed in philosophical clothing. I am saying something more specific than that, and something perhaps more uncomfortable. I am saying that the future is not fixed, but it has a lean, a direction, a current, and that current was not assigned to you from outside. It was built by you slowly, through repetition, through the accumulated weight of choices made in the ordinary unwitnessed moments of your life. And what tomorrow sees, what tomorrow already knows, is not a prediction. It is reading. It is a reading. Tomorrow reads the pattern, the way a navigator reads a star chart. Not guessing, not forecasting, reading, following the logic of what is actually there. The seeds of a consequence were planted in ordinary soil, in ordinary hours, by ordinary acts that felt like nothing at the time. A choice not to speak, a choice not to feel, a choice not to begin, a choice not to return. Each one, nothing. Each one a seed. And seeds do not announce themselves. They do not call attention to their growth. They work underground, in the dark, in the quiet, until one day there is a tree where there was only soil. And then cannot remember a time before the tree, and you have forgotten entirely that you planted it. This is what Ricoeur meant when he spoke of the narrative self. The self that is always in the middle of a story It is both telling and living. You did not begin this story today. You have been telling it for years. The chapters that have already been written are casting their shadow on every page that comes after. But stories can turn. Not easily, not without cost, not without the strange grief of admitting that the direction you have been moving was not the direction you wanted to be moving, that you have been telling a story you would not have chosen if you had been paying full attention. But they can turn. The turn does not require a dramatic event. It does not require a revelation or a crisis or a moment or cinematic clarity. It requires something quieter, harder, looking. It requires looking, really looking at the pattern, at the road, at what the pattern reveals about where the road ends. It requires letting yourself know what tomorrow already knows. Tomorrow does not bring consequences. It reveals what the day has been building. It always has been. It always was. It just waited until you were ready to look. End of episode 3, Reflections of Mosy, the Tomorrow series.